Millionaire disguises himself as a can collector to test his own mother, and is surprised by what happens. Marcus Patterson had built a real estate empire by the age of 43, but a doubt had been gnawing at his heart for months. Would his mother, Mrs. Catherine, still be the same simple and generous woman as before, or had the $1 million settlement he secured for her changed her character forever? That's how Marcus found himself sitting in a borrowed wheelchair, wearing a dirty orange t-shirt and torn pants, strategically positioned on the corner of the street where his mother had lived for 30 years. The Meadowbrook neighborhood, on the outskirts of Los Angeles, still had the simple houses and cobblestone streets he knew since childhood. Marcus adjusted the plastic bag full of empty cans next to the chair and pulled the dirty cap down over his face. 3 years had passed since the last time he visited his mother. 3 years since she received the $2 million settlement he won in court, after years of fighting the company that caused his father's workplace accident. The memory still hurt. Marcus remembered perfectly the day he handed the check to Mrs. Catherine. She had cried, kissed his hands, and promised the money would be used wisely. But after that, something changed between them. Her calls became less frequent. When he tried to visit her, there was always an excuse to postpone the meeting. Marcus's friends began to plant seeds of doubt in his mind. "Be careful, Marcus," his partner Brian would say. "Money changes people. Even family can change." The words echoed in his head as he watched the street activity. It was a Thursday morning when Marcus decided to put his plan into action. He had borrowed the wheelchair from a doctor friend, created a whole story about a social research project he was doing. The dirty clothes he got from a costume shop, but he made sure to age them properly. The sun was starting to get warm when Marcus saw a familiar figure appear on the corner. It was Mrs. Catherine, carrying a shopping bag. At 72, she still walked with a firm step, her grey hair tied in a simple bun. She wore a simple cotton dress, nothing that indicated the fortune she now possessed. Marcus pulled his cap down further and pretended to fiddle with the cans as she approached. His heart raced when he realized Mrs. Catherine had stopped right in front of him, studying him carefully. "Good morning," she said softly. "Do you need anything?" Marcus changed his voice, making it raspier. "Good morning, ma'am, just here collecting some cans." Mrs. Catherine continued to observe him for a few seconds that felt like an eternity to Marcus. He was sure he had been recognized, but then she said, "Where do you have lunch? Do you have a place to sleep?" "Oh, ma'am, I get by as I can. Sometimes I get a meal here, another there." "Wait right here a moment," said Mrs. Catherine, adjusting her bag. "I'll get something for you." Marcus watched his mother enter one of the simple little houses on the street. It was the house where he had grown up, with its peeling walls and the creaky iron gate. Nothing had changed on the outside. 15 minutes later, Mrs. Catherine returned, carrying a deep dish covered with a clean cloth. The smell that reached Marcus made him swallow hard. It was the unmistakable aroma of his mother's bean stew. "It's still warm," she said, handing him the dish. "And here's some cold water." She extended a small thermos. Marcus took the dish with trembling hands, not for the act, but from genuine emotion. "You don't even know me and you're already giving me food." "Why?" Mrs. Catherine smiled in that way he'd known since he was a boy. "A hungry person doesn't have a specific face, my son. Come over, I'll get more later." While Marcus ate, Mrs. Catherine pulled a plastic chair from inside the house and sat beside him. "What's your name?" "It's John," lied Marcus. "John, do you have family around here?" "No, ma'am. Real family. Just a mother I haven't seen in a long time." "Did you have a fight?" Marcus chewed slowly, savoring not just the food, but that unique moment. "We didn't fight. Life just took us in different directions. She got rich all of a sudden, and well, you can see how I am." Mrs. Catherine shook her head. "That's so sad, John. Money shouldn't separate family. On the contrary, it should bring them closer." "You really think so?" "I'm sure. Look, John, I also came into some good money a few years back, a settlement because of my husband. And you know what I found out? That money is like water. It's no good if it just sits there. It has to flow. It has to irrigate." Marcus almost choked on the beans. "What do you mean, Mrs. Catherine?" "Mrs. Catherine." What I mean is that money saved away doesn't bring happiness. Money used to help, that's what's worthwhile. But didn't you want to buy a better house? A car? Mrs. Catherine laughed. What for? I have a house that keeps the rain off. I have food every day. I have my health. What more do I need? I'd rather use the money helping those who really need it. Marcus finished eating in silence, processing his mother's every word. When he returned the plate, Mrs. Catherine said, "John, you come back here tomorrow at the same time. I'll have lunch ready." "But Mrs. Catherine, you hardly know me." "So what? Did you know your mother when you were born? Knowing someone is something you build over time. Come back here tomorrow." Marcus spent the rest of the day thinking about the conversation. That night, in his luxurious apartment in the Upper West Side, he felt more confused than ever. His mother didn't seem to have changed at all. She was still the same generous woman. The next morning, Marcus returned to the same spot. Mrs. Catherine appeared promptly with another plate of food, this time a shepherd's pie with dried meat that reminded him of his childhood. "John, where did you sleep last night?" "Oh, Mrs. Catherine, I found a little spot around." "That's absurd. It's cold at night. You can sleep on my porch. I'll leave a blanket." "That's not necessary, ma'am. I don't want to be a bother." "A bother is keeping a house empty while people are out in the cold. Tomorrow you sleep there." During the meal, an older woman approached. "Catherine, who is this young man?" "This is John, Mrs. Dorothy. He needs a little help." Mrs. Dorothy, a woman of about 60, looked at Marcus with suspicion. "Be careful, Catherine. Nowadays you can't trust anyone." "Mrs. Dorothy, if we don't trust anyone, how are we going to help? And if we don't help, what's the point of being here?" Marcus watched the dialogue, fascinated. His mother was defending a complete stranger. "But Catherine, with all that money you received, you could live better away from these problems." "That money isn't mine, Mrs. Dorothy. It's a blessing I received to share. If I run from problems, how will I be able to help solve them?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. After Mrs. Dorothy walked away, Marcus asked, "Mrs. Catherine, is it true you have money saved?" "Yes, I do, John. Not much more because I've already used most of it helping the neighborhood, but I still have enough to live well and keep helping." "What do you mean you've already used it?" Mrs. Catherine pointed to a house 2 blocks down. "See that house there? It was all cracked, the roof caving in. Mr. Henry's family couldn't afford to fix it. I paid for the whole renovation." Marcus followed his mother's finger and saw a simple but well-kept little house with a fresh coat of paint. "And right there on the corner," she continued, "is Mr. Walter's bakery. He was about to go bankrupt because he couldn't pay his suppliers. I lent him the money interest-free. He's already paid back almost all of it." "You lent it without interest?" "Interest for what, John? The man was already suffering. Was I going to charge interest on top of suffering?" Marcus fell silent. He was beginning to understand where the settlement money had been spent. "And there's more," said Mrs. Catherine. "Every Thursday I buy school supplies for the neighborhood children. Every Friday I pay for Mrs. Martha's medicine. She has diabetes. And every month I give a food basket to 3 families who are unemployed." "But what about you? Didn't you save anything for yourself?" "Yes, I did. I saved enough so I wouldn't be in need and could keep helping. The rest was excess." Marcus finished eating, even more confused. His mother hadn't changed for the worse, quite the opposite. She had become even more generous. On the 3rd day, when Marcus arrived at the usual spot, he found Mrs. Catherine talking to a young man of about 20. "John, this is Tyler. Tyler, this is the John I told you about." The young man greeted Marcus with a smile. "Hi, John. Mrs. Catherine told me about you. If you need anything, you can talk to me." After Tyler walked away, Marcus asked, "Who is he?" "He's one of the boys I help. Tyler was addicted to drugs, living on the street. I paid for treatment for him, and now he works at an auto repair shop. He's even saving money to get married." "You did all that?" "Not me, John. God did it through me. I just made available what I had." Marcus began to realize he had completely misjudged his mother. Where he saw a negative change, what had actually happened was a multiplication of her natural kindness. "John, can I ask you a personal question?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Go ahead. Do you remember your mother fondly?" "I do, very much." "And why don't you look for her?" Marcus improvised. Ah, Mrs. Catherine, it's complicated. She got rich, and I ended up like this. I'm ashamed. Ashamed of what? Do you think a real mother cares about that? I don't know. John, a real mother loves her child regardless of his condition, rich or poor, handsome or ugly, successful or not. A mother's love has no conditions. The words hit Marcus like a punch in the stomach. He lowered his head to hide the tears beginning to form. You know what I think you should do? Continued Mrs. Catherine. What? Look for this mother, talk to her, explain your situation. I'm sure she'll welcome you with open arms. Marcus couldn't answer. Emotion was taking over him. John, are you all right? Yes, Mrs. Catherine. It's just that your words really got to me. Sometimes we need to hear certain things. Do you want me to help you find your mother? Marcus almost confessed everything right then. That's not necessary, Mrs. Catherine. I know where she lives. Then why don't you go? It's complicated. Mrs. Catherine gently held Marcus's hand. John, life is already complicated by nature. What we can do is not make it more complicated. Go look for your mother. That afternoon, Marcus returned home completely shaken. He had spent 3 days being cared for by his own mother, who hadn't shown a hint of negative change. On the contrary, she was more generous than ever. But one doubt gnawed at Marcus. What if Mrs. Catherine had recognized him from the first day? What if she was just pretending not to know who he was? On the 4th day, Marcus decided to test his suspicion. He arrived earlier at the usual spot and hid behind a tree to observe the activity around his mother's house. What he saw left him even more confused. Mrs. Catherine came out of the house carrying a lunchbox and headed to the spot where Marcus usually was. When she didn't find him, she became visibly worried, looking all around. After a few minutes, she went back home and returned with a chair and an umbrella, setting up a sort of waiting post. She sat there for over an hour, clearly waiting for Marcus to arrive. Marcus was moved. His mother really cared about that stranger named John. He came out from behind the tree and approached slowly. Mrs. Catherine, sorry for the delay. Her face lit up. John, I was worried. I thought something had happened. Nothing happened, no. I just woke up a little later. That's good. Come, lunch is ready. Today I made that pot roast that melts in your mouth. While eating, Marcus discreetly observed his mother's every gesture. If she had recognized him, she was an extraordinary actress. But he was starting to believe she really didn't know who he was. John, yesterday I kept thinking about what you said about your mother. Thinking what? If you want, I can go with you to talk to her. Sometimes a third person helps break the ice. Marcus almost choked. You would do that for me? Of course. A mother is a sacred thing, John. She can't be separated from her son because of pride or misunderstanding. But you don't even know me well. John, knowing someone isn't a matter of time. It's a matter of heart. And my heart tells me you're a good person going through a hard time. Everyone deserves a second chance. That night, Marcus called his partner Brian. Brian, I need to tell you something. Go ahead, Marcus. Remember you said money changes people? That even family can change? I remember. Why? You were wrong, at least in my mother's case. Marcus told the whole story to Brian, who was impressed. Marcus, are you sure she didn't recognize you? I'm almost certain she didn't. And you know what impresses me the most? She's using the settlement money exactly how I would hope she'd use it, helping everyone. So why don't you reveal yourself? Because now I'm ashamed, Brian. I spent 3 years doubting her, 3 years avoiding visiting her because I thought she had changed, and she's still the same amazing person she always was. Marcus, you have to tell her the truth. I know. I just don't know how. On the 5th day, Marcus arrived at the spot and found Mrs. Catherine very agitated. John, something terrible happened. What is it, Mrs. Catherine? Mrs. Evelyn, who lives in the blue house over there, had a stroke last night. She's in the hospital and the family doesn't have money to pay for the treatment. And what are you going to do? I'll talk to the doctor to see how much the treatment costs. If I can pay for it, I will pay. Marcus was impressed. But Mrs. Catherine, you barely know this, Mrs. Evelyn. John, suffering is like hunger. It doesn't have a specific owner. If I can help, I will help. At that moment, a desperate woman arrived. Mrs. Catherine, Mrs. Catherine. Calm down, Patricia. What is it? It's about my mother, Mrs. Evelyn. The doctor said the treatment will cost $15,000. We don't have that kind of money. Mrs. Catherine didn't hesitate. Patricia, you come to the bank with me right now. I'll withdraw the money. Mrs. Catherine, I can't accept this. Yes, you can. Your mother looked after the neighborhood kids when everyone was working. Now it's time for the neighborhood to look after her. Marcus watched the whole scene in silence. $15,000. His mother was going to spend $15,000 on a neighbor without blinking. When Patricia walked away to get the documents, Marcus asked, Mrs. Catherine, isn't $15,000 a lot of money? It is, John. But do you know what's much more? Letting someone suffer when you can help. But what if you run out of money? John, money is like a seed. If you plant it, it grows. If you hoard it, it rots. I'd rather plant the seeds. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. That afternoon, Marcus accompanied Mrs. Catherine to the bank. He waited outside while she withdrew the money. When she came out, her face was serene, like someone who had just done the right thing. John, would you like to come with me to the hospital? I want to deliver the money personally. Marcus agreed, curious to see how the handover would go. At the hospital, Mrs. Catherine looked for Mrs. Evelyn's family and discreetly handed over the envelope with the money. Mrs. Catherine, how are we going to pay this back? Asked Patricia. You're not paying anything back, my dear. Consider it a gift. But Mrs. Catherine, Patricia, your mother has already paid this and much more with all the years she dedicated to helping others. Now go take care of her treatment. Marcus watched everything, moved. His mother didn't seek recognition, didn't demand eternal gratitude, didn't impose conditions. She simply helped. On the way back, Marcus asked, Mrs. Catherine, doesn't it hurt to spend so much money like that? You know what hurts, John. Knowing you can help and not helping. That's what hurts the soul. You must have spent almost all the compensation money by now. I have indeed. And do you know what I gained in return? What? I gained people's affection. I gained the satisfaction of seeing people's lives improve. I gained the certainty that I'm doing what's right. That's worth more than any money. Marcus was silent for a few minutes. Then he asked, Mrs. Catherine, if your son showed up here right now, what would you say to him? Oh, John, I would say that I love him more than anything in life, that no matter what happened all these years, he will always be my son, and that the only thing I want is to have him close by. Even if he had misjudged you, even if he had doubted your character. Mrs. Catherine stopped walking and looked directly into Marcus's eyes. John, a mother's love doesn't judge. A mother's love forgives even before there's repentance. If my son had any doubts about me, I'd say he had his reasons, and that now we can start over. Marcus almost confessed everything at that moment. His mother's words were exactly what his heart needed to hear. And if he was ashamed to look for you? I'd say that between a mother and a son there is no shame, there is only love. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. His mother's words echoed in his mind. She had made it clear that she loved him unconditionally, that she would forgive him anything, that she only wanted him near. On the 6th day, Marcus made a decision. He would reveal himself. He couldn't bear the charade any longer, especially after everything he had witnessed. He arrived at the usual spot and found Mrs. Catherine, as always, with food ready. Mrs. Catherine, I need to tell you something important. Go ahead, John. It's about my mother. Have you decided to look for her? More or less. It's complicated. Mrs. Catherine sat beside him. John, you can tell me. I'm here to listen. Marcus took a deep breath. Mrs. Catherine, what if I told you that my mother is closer than you think? What do you mean? What if I told you that I've already found her, that she's been taking care of me all these days without knowing who I am? Mrs. Catherine looked at Marcus carefully. John, I don't understand. Mrs. Catherine. Marcus began to remove the dirty cap. My name isn't John. Mrs. Catherine's eyes widened as Marcus completely removed the disguise, and she could clearly see her son's face. "Marcus!" Her voice came out as a whisper. "It's me, Mom." To Marcus's surprise, Mrs. Catherine began to laugh. It wasn't a laugh of nervousness or anger, but a laugh of relief. "Son, I knew it was you from the very first day." Marcus froze. "How?" "Marcus, I carried you for 9 months in my belly, breastfed you, raised you, cared for you when you were sick. Do you think I wouldn't recognize my own son?" But you pretended you didn't know. I pretended because I realized you needed to learn something, and I wanted to teach you." Marcus was speechless. That whole week he thought he was testing his mother, when in fact he was the one being tested. "Mom, Marcus, why did you do this? Why did you think it was necessary to test me?" Marcus lowered his head, ashamed. "Because I thought the money had changed you. I thought you had become different. And now, what do you think? I think I'm the one who changed, Mom. I'm the one who drifted away. You remained the same wonderful person you've always been." Mrs. Catherine held her son's hands. "Marcus, do you want to know why I pretended not to know you?" "Why?" "Because I realized you had doubts about me. And I realized that instead of you judging me poorly, it was better for you to see with your own eyes how I use the money." "You weren't upset with me?" "Upset? Marcus, I was happy. After 3 years, my son was finally close to me again, even if it was in disguise." Marcus began to cry. "Mum, forgive me. Forgive me for doubting you. Forgive me for drifting away." Mrs. Catherine hugged her son tightly. "My son, there's nothing to forgive. You are my son, I love you unconditionally. But I was unfair." "Marcus, unfairness is a mother and son being separated by misunderstanding. Now that we understand each other, let's start over." Marcus cried in his mother's lap like he hadn't since he was a child. All the tension of those years dissolved in that embrace. "Mom, I want to change. I want to help you with the projects. I want to learn to use my money the way you use yours." "Marcus, you don't need to change everything at once. True change is gradual. But I want to help. I want to be useful here in the community." Mrs. Catherine smiled. "Then let's talk. There's a lot we can do together." In the following weeks, Marcus began regularly visiting his mother's house. He learned about all the projects she maintained, all the people she helped, all the needs of the community. He discovered that Mrs. Catherine kept a notebook where she wrote down all the needs of the families in the neighborhood. It was a detailed list of who needed medicine, who was unemployed, which children needed school supplies, which houses needed repairs. "Mom, you're like an unofficial social worker for the neighborhood." "Marcus, a social worker is someone with a degree. I'm just a neighbor who cares." Marcus was impressed by his mother's organization. She didn't help randomly, but had a planned and efficient system. "Mom, what if we professionalize this? What if we created a small NGO?" "Marcus, I don't want bureaucracy, I want simplicity. But with a better structure, we could help more people." Mrs. Catherine thought for a moment. "If it's to help more, I accept, but without complicating things." Marcus began investing his time and resources in his mother's projects. He renovated the community school, installed a small library, created a professional training program for young people. But the most important thing was that he rediscovered the satisfaction of helping people. Every family helped, every life transformed, every problem solved, brought a happiness that his accumulated money had never provided. "Mum, now I understand why you use money this way." "Understand what, son?" "I understand that true wealth isn't what we have, but what we share." Mrs. Catherine hugged her son. "Now you're talking like the Marcus I raised." 6 months later, Marcus had completely changed his routine. He spent his mornings tending to business and his afternoons working in the community. His company remained profitable, but now the profits had a greater purpose. One day, Mrs. Dorothy, the neighbor who had been suspicious of Marcus when he was in disguise, approached him. "Marcus, I want to apologize to you." "Apologize for what, Mrs. Dorothy?" "For being suspicious of you when you were dressed as a waste picker, for judging by appearances." "Mrs. Dorothy, you don't need to apologize. You were protecting my mother. Even so, it was my prejudice." Marcus reflected. Dorothy, do you know what I learned? That we all have prejudices. I myself was prejudiced against my own mother. The important thing is to recognize it and change. You are a good man, Marcus. Your mother is lucky to have a son like you. Mrs. Dorothy, I am the lucky one to have a mother like her. During an evening conversation on the porch of the Simple House, Mrs. Catherine said, Marcus, do you want to know why I never moved away from here? Why, Mom? Because here I know every neighbor, every family, every problem. If I went to live in a fancier place, how would I know who needs help? You've thought about all this? Marcus, when you get rich overnight, you have two choices. Either you distance yourself from people or you get closer to them. I chose to get closer. And it was the right choice. Son, I was rich when you were little and came running to hug me after school. Rich is having a united family. The rest is extra. Marcus hugged his mother. Mom, thank you for teaching me that. Thank you for what? For teaching me that the true value of things isn't in the price, but in the impact they have on people's lives. 2 years had passed since the day Marcus disguised himself as a waste picker. The Meadowbrook community had been transformed. The school was renovated. There was a community library, a health clinic functioning properly, and several families had managed to improve their living conditions. But the greatest transformation had happened in Marcus. He had rediscovered his humanity, had found his life's purpose again, had rebuilt his relationship with his mother. Mom, can I confess something? Of course, son. When I disguised myself as a waste picker, I wasn't testing you. I was testing myself. How so? I was testing if I still had the courage to be human, if I could still be moved by simple things, if I still had the capacity to love without self-interest. Mrs. Catherine smiled. And what was the result of the test? The result was that I discovered I never stopped being human. I was just asleep. And now I'm wide awake. During a community meeting, Marcus was elected president of the Residents Association. It was a recognition of the work he had developed over the past few years. Marcus, said Mr. Henry, the man whose house had been renovated by Mrs. Catherine, we want to thank you for everything you and your mother have done here. Mr. Henry, I'm the one who should be thankful. You taught me the true value of life. How so? You taught me that happiness isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we share. The community applauded. Marcus had become not just a neighbor, but a respected and beloved leader. That night, Marcus and Mrs. Catherine were sitting on the porch, watching the street activity. Son, do you regret anything? I regret having doubted you. I regret having stayed away for 3 years. I regret having thought money was more important than family. And what don't you regret? Marcus thought for a moment. I don't regret having disguised myself as a waste picker. Why? Because that's how I learned that you hadn't changed. That's how I learned that the one who changed was me. And that's how I managed to truly become your son again. Mrs. Catherine held her son's hand. Marcus, you have always truly been my son. Rich or poor, far or near, doubting or trusting. Nothing changes that. Mom, can I ask a question? Of course. How did you know I would come back? Because I know you, Marcus. I knew that one day you would miss what truly matters. I just didn't know when. And if I hadn't come back, I would have kept loving you, and I would have kept waiting. Marcus was moved. How are you so sure about everything? Marcus, a mother isn't sure about anything. A mother has faith. Faith in the son she raised. Faith in the good man he is inside. Faith in the love that exists between you. In the 3rd year after the disguise, Marcus made an important decision. He sold his luxurious apartment and moved permanently to Meadowbrook. He bought a simple house on the same street as his mother. Marcus, are you sure about this? Asked his partner Brian. I am completely sure. But you're going to give up all the comfort. Brian, I discovered that true comfort isn't in expensive furniture or a big house. True comfort is in feeling useful, in being close to the people we love, in making a difference in people's lives. Marcus kept his company, but began managing it remotely. His business continued to prosper, but now he had a clear purpose for the profits. "Mom, I want to propose an official partnership." "What kind of partnership?" "I handle the financial side of the projects. You handle the human side." "Marcus, don't we already do that?" "We do, but now I want to make it official. I want you to be my official partner in everything." Mrs. Catherine laughed. "Son, I've always been your partner, since the day you were born." They formally created the Catherine and Marcus Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to community development. Marcus contributed financial resources and business knowledge. Mrs. Catherine contributed human wisdom and knowledge of local needs. "Mom, do you want to know something funny?" "What?" "Today, I earn less money than before. I work more hours than before. I have less free time than before. But I have never been so happy in my life. Why do you think that happens? Because now my work has meaning. Every dollar I earn, I know where it's going. Every hour I work, I know it will result in something good for someone." Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. The Catherine and Marcus Foundation became a reference in the region. Other business owners began seeking out Marcus to understand how he reconciled profitable business with social responsibility. "Marcus," asked a business owner in a meeting, "how do you convince shareholders to support these social projects?" "I don't convince anyone. I show results. An educated and prosperous community is a better market for everyone." "But what about the financial return?" "The financial return exists, but the human return is much greater." Marcus became a frequent speaker at business events, always accompanied by Mrs. Catherine. The two formed an unusual pair, the successful businessman and the simple lady who had taught him about true values. "Mrs. Catherine," asked a businesswoman after a talk, "what is the secret to raising children who care about others?" "There is no secret. It's by setting an example. A child learns more by what they see than by what they hear." "But how do you set an example?" "By being generous in front of them, helping a neighbor in front of them, showing that sharing is more enjoyable than keeping." Marcus watched proudly as his mother answered the questions with her simple and profound wisdom. 5 years after the disguise episode, Marcus and Mrs. Catherine were honored by the city as Citizens of the Year. During the ceremony, Marcus was called to give a speech. "I want to thank you for this honor, but first I want to clarify something. I don't deserve to be here." The audience murmured in surprise. "I don't deserve to be here because everything I do today, I learned from the woman sitting in the front row. My mother, Mrs. Catherine." Marcus pointed to his mother, who flushed with emotion. 5 years ago, I was a rich but empty businessman. I had a lot of money but little humanity. It was my mother who taught me that true wealth is measured by the number of lives we improve, not by the number of zeros in the bank account. The audience applauded. "So, if you want to honor someone, honor her, because all the good you see in me came from her." Marcus asked Mrs. Catherine to come up on stage. She tried to resist, but the audience began to clap and shout, "Mrs. Catherine! Mrs. Catherine!" Reluctantly, she went up on stage and took the microphone. "Folks, I don't know how to give speeches. I only know how to do one thing: take care of people." The audience laughed and applauded. "My son Marcus was always a good boy. He was just a little lost. But when someone gets lost, it doesn't mean they can't be found." More applause. "What I want to tell you is that everyone can change, everyone can improve, everyone can discover they are happier when they help others." Mrs. Catherine looked at Marcus, and a mother never stops believing in her child. Never. Marcus went up on stage and hugged his mother. Both were crying with emotion, and so was a good part of the audience. That night at home, Marcus said, "Mom, thank you for never giving up on me." "Marcus, a mother who gives up on her child is not a mother. Even when I distanced myself, even when I doubted you, especially in those moments. Why? Because that's when a child needs his mother most. When he's pulling away, it's a sign he's confused. And confusion isn't solved with abandonment. It's solved with patience." Marcus reflected on his mother's words. She was right, as always. Mum, can I confess one last thing about that day I disguised myself? Of course, son. When you offered me food without knowing me, when you treated me with kindness even though I was a stranger, in that moment I remembered how you treated me when I was a child. And how did I treat you? With unconditional love, without judgment, always ready to help. And then? Then I realized you hadn't changed at all. I was the one who had forgotten what true love is like. Mrs. Catherine hugged her son. Marcus, true love is like the sun. Sometimes clouds hide it, but it's still there, shining. Mum, now I understand everything. Understand what? I understand why you pretended not to recognize me. You wanted me to rediscover your love through your actions, not through your words. That's right, son, because love is proven by doing, not by talking. Marcus smiled. You are the wisest woman I know. Marcus, wisdom isn't knowing many things. Wisdom is knowing what truly matters. And what truly matters? Family, son. Family and the ability to do good. 10 years had passed since the day of the disguise. Marcus was now a completely transformed man. The Catherine and Marcus Foundation had benefited thousands of families. Meadowbrook had become a model of community development, but the most important thing was the relationship between mother and son. They had become true partners, working together every day, sharing dreams and achievements. During a Sunday morning, they were walking through the community when they met Tyler, the former addict Mrs. Catherine had helped years before. Mrs. Catherine. Marcus! Tyler approached, smiling, accompanied by a young woman and a small child. Tyler, how are you? Asked Mrs. Catherine. I'm great. I want to introduce my wife Jennifer and my son, Marcus. Marcus was moved. You named your son Marcus? Of course, in honor of both of you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here today. Tyler shared that he had opened his own auto repair shop, was building his own house, and planned to have more children. Mrs. Catherine, you saved my life. Tyler, the person who saved your life was you. I just offered an opportunity. After Tyler walked away with his family, Marcus said, Mum, did you see? He named his son Marcus because of me. I saw, son. And doesn't that move you? Very much. But you know what moves me more? What? Knowing that this boy will grow up in a stable family, will have an education, will have opportunities. And all of that started with your kindness. Mrs. Catherine smiled. Marcus, kindness is like a seed. You plant one, but many grow. They continued walking and came across the house where Mrs. Evelyn had lived, the woman Mrs. Catherine had helped pay for medical treatment. The house was now occupied by her children. Marcus, said Patricia, Mrs. Evelyn's daughter. My mother lived 5 more years after that treatment. 5 precious years we gained thanks to you. How was she in her final days? Asked Mrs. Catherine. Happy. Always talking about you. Always telling everyone that family is who cares for us, not necessarily who shares the same blood. Marcus and Mrs. Catherine looked at each other. Mrs. Evelyn's words echoed something they had learned. True family is built with love and care. At the end of their walk, they sat on a bench in the little square that Marcus had renovated. Son, do you remember what this place was like before? I do. It was a vacant lot full of weeds. And now? Marcus looked around. Children playing, elderly people chatting, young couples dating, families having picnics. Now it's a place full of life. Marcus, that is transformation, not just of the space but of the people. Mum, can I ask a question I've always wanted to ask? Of course. On the day you received the settlement, what went through your mind? Mrs. Catherine thought for a moment. I thought that I had 2 choices. Use that money to distance myself from problems or to move closer to solutions. And why did you choose to move closer? Because distancing is easy, Marcus. Anyone can build a wall. But moving closer, solving, caring, that takes courage. Were you ever afraid? I was afraid of spending everything and not being able to help anyone else. I was afraid you wouldn't understand my choices. I was afraid of dying and leaving people depending on my help. And now? Do you still have those fears? Not now, because now I know I planted seeds that will keep growing even without me. And mainly because now I have you as my partner. Marcus held his mother's hand. Mum, I had fears too. What fears? Fear that you had changed. Fear of having lost the mother I knew. Fear of not being able to be your son again. And did you overcome those fears? I overcame them the moment you offered me that first plate of food. In that moment, I knew nothing had changed between us. Mrs. Catherine smiled. Marcus, true love doesn't change. Sometimes it hides, sometimes it gets confused, but it doesn't change. Mum, if you could go back in time, would you do anything differently? I would. What? I would have looked for you sooner. I would have gone to your apartment. I would have forced a conversation. I wouldn't have waited for you to come to me. But you always said you respected my time. And I did. But sometimes, too much respect can turn into neglect. If I had been more insistent, maybe we wouldn't have lost 3 years. Marcus reflected. Mum, maybe those 3 years were necessary. Why? Because I needed to mature. I needed to discover that financial success without purpose is empty. If you had looked for me sooner, I might not have been ready to learn. Do you really think so? I do. Everything has its time, and our time to reconnect was exactly that one. Mrs. Catherine hugged her son. Marcus, you've become a very wise man. I learned from the best teacher. They stayed silent for a few minutes, watching life happen around them. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who know each other deeply. Mum, can I say something? Always. I love you more today than I did when I was a child. Why? Because as a child, I loved you for what you did for me. Today I love you for who you are. Mrs. Catherine was moved. Marcus, that's the most beautiful declaration of love I've ever heard. It's true, Mum. You taught me that loving isn't just receiving care, but also admiring a person's character. And I admire your character too, son. Really? Marcus, you completely transformed your life. You gave up comforts to dedicate yourself to others. That requires extraordinary character. I learned from you. You applied it, and that makes all the difference. The sun was setting when they decided to head back home. On the way, they stopped at Mr. Walter's bakery, which Mrs. Catherine had helped years ago. Mrs. Catherine, Marcus, so good to see you. How's business, Mr. Walter? Asked Marcus. Great. Thanks to your mother's loan, I managed to get back on my feet. Today I have 2 bakeries and employ 12 people. That's wonderful, said Mrs. Catherine. And the best part is that now I also help other merchants in difficulty. I learned from you that success isn't just about making money, but also sharing opportunities. Marcus and Mrs. Catherine looked at each other, smiling. The cycle of kindness kept multiplying. Mr. Walter, said Marcus, would you like to participate in a project of ours? What project? We're creating an association of small business owners in the area. The idea is for everyone to help each other. I'd love to participate. After the bakery, they passed by the school they had renovated. Even though it was Sunday, there was activity in the courtyard. What's happening there? Asked Mrs. Catherine. They approached and discovered that the teachers were giving voluntary tutoring classes on weekends. The initiative had come from them. Mrs. Williams, asked Marcus, why are you working on Sunday? Marcus, after everything you did for the school, we wanted to give back. These extra classes are our contribution. But you already work all week. So what? We love what we do. And these children deserve every effort. Marcus was moved. Generosity was contagious. One good action motivated other good actions. Mom, said Marcus when they left the school, did you see? Kindness multiplies on its own. I saw, son. It's what I always say. Kindness is like a good virus. It spreads. Do you think we're managing to change anything? Marcus, look around. Do you see anything the same as 10 years ago? Marcus observed. The houses were better kept, the streets cleaner, the people more smiling, the children better dressed. No, everything is different. Then we succeeded. But there's still a lot to do. And we'll do it. Slowly, with patience, but we'll do it. They arrived home when the sky was already dark. Mrs. Catherine made some tea, and they sat on the porch. Marcus, do you have any regrets in life? I do. What? I regret taking so long to understand that happiness has nothing to do with a bank account. And what don't you regret? I don't regret disguising myself as a waste picker, because that's how I rediscovered who I really am. Who are you really? I am Mrs. Catherine's son, and that is more important than any title I could ever have. Mrs. Catherine was moved. Marcus, you gave me the most precious gift a mother can receive. What gift? The gift of seeing your child become a better person than yourself. Mum, I will never be better than you. You already are, son, because you managed to bring together two things I never had, financial resources and social awareness. That makes you very powerful in doing good. Powerful in doing good. I like that expression. That's what you are, Marcus. A person powerful in doing good. They talked late into the night, reminiscing about stories, making plans for the future, sharing dreams. Mom, what is your biggest dream now? My biggest dream is to see our foundation spreading to other communities. Imagine if we could take this model to other cities. It's possible. I've already received proposals from business people in other regions. Really? Really? There are people who want to learn how we do it. Marcus, if we can teach other people to do what we do, we will multiply. That's what I want, Mom. I want every community to have its own Mrs. Catherine. And every business person to have their own moment of clarity like you did. Exactly. They talked about the possibility of creating a national network of community foundations, all based on the model they had developed. Mom, imagine if in 20 years there are 1,000 foundations like ours spread across the United States. I can imagine, son, and I imagine how many lives would be transformed. Millions. Marcus, that's not a dream. That's a goal. The following week, Marcus and Mrs. Catherine received a visit from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to film their story. You are an inspiring example, said the filmmaker, the story of the business person who rediscovered his humanity through his mother's wisdom. We don't want to be an example of anything, said Mrs. Catherine. We just want to live according to our values. But you can inspire other people. Marcus thought for a moment. If our story can inspire someone to be more generous, then it's worth telling. The documentary was produced and aired on a national network. The impact was enormous. Marcus and Mrs. Catherine received hundreds of messages from people who felt motivated to change their own lives. Mom, look how many people got in touch. Marcus, that's responsibility. Now we have to be consistent with what we preach. We always have been, and we have to keep being so, because a lot of people are watching. Fame brought opportunities, but also challenges. Marcus and Mrs. Catherine had to learn to deal with public exposure. Mom, sometimes I worry if we're not showing off too much. Marcus, there's a difference between showing off and giving testimony. What's the difference? Those who show off want admiration. Those who give testimony want transformation. And we want transformation. Exactly. That's why we agree to talk about our story. Marcus understood they could use the visibility to multiply good. Every speech, every interview, every public appearance was an opportunity to plant seeds of kindness. 15 years after the disguise episode, Marcus was invited to be the keynote speaker at an international conference on social responsibility. Mom, they want me to speak to 3,000 business people from 20 different countries. And will you go? Only if you come with me. Marcus, I don't speak English. You don't need to. You speak the universal language, the language of love. Mrs. Catherine, at 87 years old, accompanied Marcus to the conference. During the speech, Marcus told the whole story, the disguise, the discovery, the transformation. My mother, said Marcus in English, taught me that true wealth is not what we accumulate but what we share. The audience was moved. At the end, Mrs. Catherine was called to the stage and received a standing ovation. I don't speak English, she said into the microphone, but I speak love. And love is the same in all languages. The audience applauded even louder. The simplicity and sincerity of Mrs. Catherine touched people from different cultures and nationalities. After the conference, Marcus and Mrs. Catherine received invitations to visit social projects in various countries. "Mother, they want us to visit similar initiatives in other places." "Marcus, travel to other countries at my age." "Mother, you are 87, but you have the energy of a 50-year-old. It's just that I still have a lot of work to do." They accepted some invitations and traveled to see inspiring projects in different parts of the world. Each trip brought new learnings and new ideas. "Marcus," said Mrs. Catherine during a visit to a project in Africa, "kindness has no borders." "How so?" "Look at these people here. They speak another language, have another culture, but they do exactly what we do. They take care of each other." Marcus observed that regardless of the place, basic human needs were the same: love, care, opportunity, dignity. "Mother, you are right. Human beings are the same anywhere. That's why our work can be replicated anywhere." When they returned to the United States, Marcus and Mrs. Catherine were even more convinced that their model could be universal. "Mother, should we create an international version of our foundation? If it's to help more people, let's do it." Marcus began working on creating an international network of community foundations. The model developed in Meadowbrook would be adapted to different cultural realities. "Marcus, Mrs. Catherine said one day, do you realize that the day you disguised yourself as a trash picker changed not only our lives, but the lives of thousands of people?" "How so?" "Think. If you hadn't disguised yourself, you wouldn't have rediscovered true values. If you hadn't rediscovered them, you wouldn't have created our foundation. If you hadn't created it, we wouldn't have helped so many people. And if we hadn't helped so many people, we wouldn't now be influencing people all over the world." Marcus was impressed. "It's true, one small action generated a gigantic effect. Marcus, that is what I call a modern miracle." A modern miracle, when a simple act of honesty generates immeasurable transformations. Marcus hugged his mother. "Mother, thank you for pretending you didn't recognize me that day." "Why?" "Because if you had recognized me immediately, I wouldn't have learned about your character through your actions." "And did that make a difference? All the difference? Seeing you helping a stranger moved me more than if you had helped your own son." "Marcus, sometimes we need to pretend we don't recognize someone so that person can recognize themselves." Profound. "It's true. When you were in disguise, I wasn't testing your character. I was helping you rediscover your own character." Marcus understood that Mrs. Catherine had orchestrated everything with maternal wisdom. She knew exactly what he needed to learn. "Mother, you are smarter than I imagined." "Marcus, a mother's intelligence is different. It's not academic knowledge. It's intuition from the heart." "And does that intuition ever fail?" "Sometimes it takes a while to get it right, but in the end, it always does." 20 years after the disguise episode, Marcus was organizing the Foundation's files when he found an old folder with Mrs. Catherine's notes. "Mom, I found your notes from the Foundation's early years." "What notes?" "Here it says Marcus needs to rediscover that happiness doesn't come from having, but from being. He needs to learn that true wealth is love multiplied." "When did you write this?" Mrs. Catherine looked at the date. "Right after you gave me the settlement money." "You already knew I was losing myself." "Yes, and I was already planning how to help you find yourself." Marcus was moved. "You mean, when I disguised myself, you were already expecting that?" "Not exactly that, but I was already expecting a moment of crisis that would make you question your values." "And if that moment never came?" "It would. It always does." Marcus understood that his mother knew him better than he knew himself. She had anticipated his existential crisis and was prepared to help him. "Mom, you're a strategist." "Marcus, a mother isn't a strategist. A mother is a seer." "A seer?" "A mother sees her child before the child sees himself." Marcus was moved by the depth of maternal love. Mrs. Catherine loved him enough to foresee his future needs. "Mom, how did you know I would come back?" "Because I know your heart, and I know that a good heart, even when lost, always finds its way back, even if it took years." even if it took decades. Marcus hugged Mrs. Catherine. "Mum, thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself. Marcus, that's a mother's job." Today, 25 years after that memorable day, Marcus is 68 and Mrs. Catherine 97. The Catherine and Marcus Foundation operates in 15 US states and has partnerships in 8 countries. Marcus never married, dedicating his life entirely to social work and caring for his mother. Mrs. Catherine maintains her lucidity and good humor, continuing to actively guide the projects. "Mom, do you have any regrets in life?" "Just one." "What?" "I regret not living more years to see more transformations." "You've seen a lot." "I have, but I wanted to see more. I wanted to see the whole world living like we live here." "Maybe one day that will happen. Marcus, I won't live to see it, but you will." "Mom, don't talk like that." "Marcus, everyone dies, but not everyone truly lives, and we have lived very well." Mrs. Catherine, even at her advanced age, maintained the wisdom that always characterized her. "Son, can I tell you one last thing about that day you disguised yourself?" "Of course." "That day, I didn't just recognize you. I recognized the boy I had raised, who was hidden beneath all that bitterness and ambition." "What do you mean?" "Marcus, the way you held the plate, how you thanked me for the food, how you looked at me when I spoke. It was exactly the same as when you were a child and I gave you food." Marcus was moved. "You recognized my gestures." "Marcus, a mother recognizes her child by the soul, not by appearance." "And why did you pretend you didn't know?" "Because I realized you needed to rediscover your own soul." Marcus understood that the whole episode had been a journey of self-discovery orchestrated by maternal love. "Mom, thank you for helping me return to who I really am." "Marcus, you've always been who you are. You were just afraid to be it." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of being sensitive in a harsh world, afraid of being generous in a selfish world, afraid of being human in an inhumane world. And now you've discovered that being sensitive, generous, and human is not a weakness. It's okay." Marcus held his mother's hand. "Mom, if I could choose 1,000 lives, in every single one I would choose to be your son, and I would choose to be your mother. Why? Because you gave me the joy of seeing a son transform, and that is the greatest joy a mother can have." That afternoon, they were sitting on the same corner where it all began 25 years earlier. The place had completely transformed. Where there was once poverty, now there was dignity. Where there was once hopelessness, now there were dreams. "Marcus, do you remember how it was here?" "I remember every detail. And can you imagine what it would be like if you hadn't disguised yourself that day?" Marcus looked around, observing children playing safely, young people studying, adults working, elderly people chatting happily. "I can't imagine, Mom. Because all of this only exists because of that day. Marcus, that day was the first day of the rest of our life." "That's true. And it was the best day of my life." "Really?" "Marcus, on that day I got my son back. There is no better day than that in a mother's life." Marcus was moved. "Mom, on that day I regained my humanity. It was also the best day of my life." They hugged right there, on the street, not caring who was watching. It was the embrace of 25 years of love, understanding, forgiveness, and complicity. "Marcus," said Mrs. Catherine, "do you want to know the exact moment when I knew you had changed forever?" "I do. It was when you asked me if I wasn't afraid of spending all the money helping others." "Why specifically at that moment?" "Because in that question I heard genuine concern. You weren't judging me for spending money. You were worrying about me." "That's true. I was worried. And that's when I knew my son had come back. Because concern for a mother's well-being is something only a true son has." Marcus smiled. "Mom, you notice every detail." "Marcus, true love notices everything." When the sun began to set, they got up to go back home. On the way, they passed the main landmarks of their journey: the house where Marcus grew up, the school they renovated, the square they built, the bakery they saved. "Marcus, are you satisfied with what we've built?" I'm more than satisfied, Mom. I am fulfilled. And what's the difference? Satisfaction is when we get what we want. Fulfillment is when we want what we've gotten. Mrs. Catherine smiled. Marcus, you've become a philosopher. I learned from the best teacher. Your teacher was life. No, Mom. My teacher was you. End of story. And now, dear listener, tell me what you thought of this touching story. Do you believe Marcus made the right decision by disguising himself? And Mrs. Catherine by pretending not to recognize him? Leave your opinion in the comments, share where you're listening from, and don't forget to leave your like. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one. Thank you for your company.